introducing the amazing panelists that we have, a lot of rich backgrounds and experiences. So I'm hoping that we can have a really nice discussion. I've written it all down so that I don't misread anything. Firstly, we have Shabnam Shabs from Melbourne. She's the Global Wellbeing and Resilience Manager for Arcadis. In her role, she's responsible for overseeing the approach to wellbeing and resilience for 27,000 employees across the world. Olivia in Rotterdam. She's the Global Program Manager for Inclusion, Diversity, Belonging and Wellbeing at Booking.com. Part of the team that actively works to create an environment at Booking.com where all people feel connected and valued and can sustainably deliver their best. She's responsible for leading wellbeing and employee engagement events as well as content. We have Ruth from Leatherhead, the UK. She's the head of workplace wellbeing at, I'm not sure if is it BAM or BAM?
Yeah, BAM Nuttall. Yeah.
BAM Nuttall, there you go. In her role, she has a responsibility for the wellbeing strategy, training and programs. At BAM Nuttall, an infrastructure and engineering employer in the UK with just over 3,000 employees. And finally, we have Gemma. Gemma is actually joining us from Nairobi. She's a staff counsellor at UNICEF. And as a counsellor at UNICEF, she supports the psychological well-being of staff and their families. This includes providing confidential counselling sessions and designing and delivering webinars to prevent burnout, reduce traumatic stress, and improve overall resiliency and mental health. Thank you, ladies. Amazing backgrounds, as I mentioned before. The style for this morning's session is that I have some questions that I'd like to ask you. The first question I'd love each of you to sort of have a go at answering. For all the audience members, feel free to ask questions, and then as we get into it, I'll just pick out a few and throw it into the panel. Okay. So the first question I've got is, ladies, can you share the biggest challenge that your organization is currently tackling to better support your employees? And I'd love to start with Shabs.
No problem. So for us, it's about how we look beyond initiatives. So creating a healthy, high-performing workforce, it requires us to look beyond the kind of apps and the programs, whilst looking at those as well. But what's the root cause? And we have to create ways for well-being to really become part of our corporate values and strategy. And so a culture of well-being, we know, isn't just limited to initiatives, but a permanent change in how work is conducted. And to quote Bishop Desmond Tutu, there comes a point where you need to just stop pulling people out of the river, but we need to go upstream and find out why they're falling in. So many of our employees are working longer hours, blurred lines between work and home. And so rather than, just trying to bring in initiatives, it's about what can we do around fixing the job itself, giving them more control, better tools, more discretion to work with their managers on how they do their jobs better without burning out. And so our biggest challenge is, how do we move to a more proactive approach rather than a reactive, here you go, call the EAP. We want that as a baseline. But we need to do more around job design to help with that kind of those issues like stress and burnout.
Yeah. No, that's I've heard that. That's interesting. Ruth, saw you nodding there. Could you maybe build on what your challenge is? Maybe some
absolutely, and I agree with everything that Shabs has just said. It is we are trying very much to be more proactive and put preventative measures in rather than the sticking plaster. Exactly as Shabs just said, here's the EAP, go and sort it out yourself. So we have introduced a very formal flexible working policy, so really getting people to think, we got it anyway, obviously law in the UK allows people to work flexibly, but in construction a lot of jobs we thought were inherently inflexible. COVID has told us actually an awful lot of jobs are very flexible, so it's really getting getting people to think about that. It's the whole work-life balance issue, and very particularly switching off from work, especially when you've got people who are working at home, that blurred line between, well, I'm sitting in my kitchen working and now it's time to cook supper, but I'll carry on doing emails kind of thing. And the surveys that we've been doing show us that's a real issue. And yeah, absolutely, the whole stress thing, we're looking to introduce the Hsc Management Standards, which very much look at job design, role, autonomy, responsibilities, and just see if there's anything we can do to give people a little bit more control and actually start reducing work-related stress. It's a huge, huge challenge for, I think, all employers, but we're at least going to make an attempt at doing that.
Yeah. No, thank you, Ruth. And yeah, over to you, Olivia. I know Booking.com, it's been tough times, especially with travel. But yeah, what about for you and your organization?
Yeah, and I agree with both of the wonderful speakers before. It really is about understanding, especially for us, how can we understand and address the individual needs of people and meet them where they are. We've asked a lot of people in this time. And how can we also make sure that going forward in the future, we really view well-being from an inclusion lens. So how can we make sure that we're in all policies, especially when we think about what is the state of working from home versus working from the office, how is the outcome at the end going to be inclusive and equitable for all? How do we make sure that people are not left behind? How do we make sure that people are given fair opportunities and access to opportunities, regardless if they're working in the office or working from home, or maybe even a mix, right? And we've clearly seen some people have loved working from home, some people have really struggled, right, depending on what your situation is. So I think for us, it's really actually the biggest challenge is how do we experiment with what the solution could be, involve employees but also limit disruption. Because I think, what we hear from colleagues is they don't mind experimentation, but they also want clarity, right? The ambiguity that still exists around in the world. They want to kind of come to work and work be a little bit of a safe haven in this ambiguous world. So they're really looking to us to provide them with clarity about what the future could look like.
Interesting. Thank you, Olivia. Gemma, over to your part of the world, which is, completely different in the sense that you're over there in Nairobi, a staff counsellor. I've read loads about the impact of COVID, and that it has had even more devastating effects in some of the developing parts of the world. Your people are out there trying to help some of those. What for you do you see as a challenge in your very, I would say, personal role?
Well, I also agree with my colleagues here. I think our biggest challenge right now is how do we move on from here? Now that many of us have been vaccinated and we are being asked to go back to the office, as some of you guys said, some people really would rather stay home, right? While others want to go back. So it's now we have this dilemma of how do we do this hybrid work model? Right? And so there is a lot of discussion about that. Here, specifically in Nairobi, we can feel the pressure from businesses to have UN people to go back to the office because, it's going to move a lot of economic interest, right? And that's what Kenya, for instance, needs. But when I work mostly with Europe also, and really that's the main challenge. People have now realized that, my goodness, now I can take my kids to school and pick them up while I'm very productive, maybe even more than before. Or I need to take care of an elderly parent and now I can have my lunch with him or her, right? So we are having a lot of discussions about how we do respect what people need while also what does the UN mission, right? Thank you.
Interesting. Okay, thank you. So going on to some initiatives, and I know that there have been some examples that Ruth and Olivia, you sort of hinted at, and again, I'd like to start with Shabs. Can you tell us about an initiative that you've implemented, which has been really well received by your employees? I know you're responsible for a large global sphere, but maybe a few that you can draw out.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a few things that I can touch on. And so one of the main ones is asking our employees with lived experience. So this is around specifically mental health, which we're focusing a lot on at the moment, to share their stories openly on their mental health challenges, obviously should they feel comfortable to do so. And this could include if it's to do with a family member or they're a caregiver of somebody with a mental health illness, all in the name of breaking down the stigma. So the stigma is the result of the negative attitudes and behaviors that unfortunately still exist towards people with mental health challenges. And it can make people feel really ashamed and socially excluded, and can obviously be a major barrier to recovery. And so hearing and having a positive experience with people who have recovered, especially in the workplace or who are in the process of recovery, we really want to help challenge and change those negative perceptions. And we're noticing it year on year, as we say, share your stories, and we do interviews and we do articles around World Mental Health Day. Year on year, 2 or 3 more people will come forward. The first time I asked 10 years ago, obviously nobody at all did. And country by country, it's been really clear to me as I've taken on this global role, there are some that wouldn't in a million years right now, but hopefully they'll see the stories being shared from mostly the UK and Australia so far. And, you know, as that stigma breaks down, you know, we want to create a culture here where everybody feels comfortable to disclose and have those conversations. So breaking down the stigma is a massive one, and having leaders share those stories as well. And then something that we implemented in the UK and Australia that we're expanding globally is mental health first aid, which I'm sure a lot of you will have heard of, but it's been a very successul program, a 2-day training course, basically giving you those first aid skills and how to respond to mental health challenges, so that, you know, you can proactively anticipate or be the person that can respond before somebody has to call the EAP. And then the people in the country that are trained up become your working group, right? To come together and talk about what we're doing around mental health and driving these initiatives and looking at the EAP data. And then we're going to bring all of those people together in a bit of a global working group to have some more structure to it. So we're really excited to be expanding that globally and giving more people skills on how to respond as well.
Perfect. That's great, Shab. So mental health, emotional well-being, all very critical topics there. Yes. Ruth?
Yeah, again, I would agree 100% with all that Shabs has just said. That's been key to our success, is getting the network of, we call them wellbeing champions, but they're the mental health first aiders. Hugely powerful. It's just that informal, on-site, personal connection that people can have. Leadership is critical. We were very lucky in our organisation. Our leadership team got it right from the start, and we do now have leaders talking about their own lived experience to a degree. We've had our previous chief executive talking about anxiety. We've had other leaders talking about anxiety, mental illness in the family, somebody being suicidal in the family, and domestic abuse. Hugely powerful, and people doing their own videos. But one particular initiative that we have that's been transformational is creation of wellbeing rooms. So we're very site-based. We've got fixed offices. We have a lot of sites, and sites can be for a few weeks to sort of 10 years, typically in porter cabins. And 2 years ago, one of our wellbeing advisors asked if she could create a wellbeing room. She was fully supported, given a modest budget to go and spend in IKEA, and she kitted. She just changed an unused, unloved stock room into a wellbeing room. So I had a sofa, an armchair, a bookcase, a coffee table, kettle, pretty pictures on the wall, fairy lights, that kind of thing. Had a desk and a desk and a chair in there. So when she wasn't doing her safety visits, she would base herself in there, and people would just come in, have a general chat about safety, and then say, actually, while I'm here, can I talk to you about such and such? And we trialled it for 3 months, thinking, well, we'll just give it a go. And we were absolutely blown away by the response. The site, the motorway project where we trialled this, there were 300 people. This was 2 years ago. 300 people, and 70 people had 210 conversations in a 3-month period. And the kind of things they were talking about were, a couple had really serious gambling addictions. It was all not work related, but obviously had the potential to have a massive impact on work. especially in safety critical roles. But it was mental health issues in the family, it was teenagers being bullied, it was teenager being self-harming, sibling in a domestic violence relationship. So many people affected by suicide in some way, whether they were bereaved, they got somebody at home who was feeling suicidal, had been or were suicidal themselves. It was even now it's a really quite shocking list of the really serious things that people were dealing with, but we were able to signpost and support. And we're now rolling out that sort of concept. It was really simple, very simple to create, and massively beneficial. And our employees really value the wellbeing rooms, and most organisations could actually create a wellbeing room quite easily. It was just to make it informal, friendly, safe, and welcoming, and it's paid dividends 100 times over.
Ruth, I've got a question on that one, just to build on that, because in our line of work, we've met so many organisations, and there are some organisations that basically say, personal topics on well-being, we don't want to go there, because if we unearth stuff, we need to do something with that. So, you've just outlined a case example of what can happen. What was your approach? What was your thinking to actually continue?
Our thinking to continue was all of our employees are dealing with this stuff, and actually we as an employer want to know about it because they're dealing with it. That's a matter of fact. And I would suggest every employer has got employees dealing with these kind of issues, and because we have made it safe for them to come forward and seek help or support or be signposted, we then realised there was a need to then build on these kind of issues to raise awareness. And the lived experience that Shabnam was talking about, that's been hugely powerful with people talking about, we started with mental health issues, just people talking about their own personal journeys with anxiety, depression, severe stress, and one or two people talking about being in that metaphoric, very dark place where they've actually been feeling suicidal. We've moved more into other health issues, and we actually had, we're obviously construction, we're very male, so suicide is a real issue in the industry and being male. But also women's issues, women's health issues are really challenging. And we had three ladies who did a facilitated discussion like this, talking about endometriosis. So a deeply personal, intimate condition that has a profound effect on them personally and professionally. And it was a real game changer for some of the men in our business that ladies, one, would talk about it, and two, what impact it has with them at work. And menopause is something we're about to start working on. But the men in the business are really interested. We get everybody to attend the webinars. It's not just, we don't send invites out saying, if you have an issue with this condition, join us. It's please join us irrespective, because the likelihood, if not now, then either you or somebody in your life, either personally or professionally, may be affected or afflicted by this condition in the future. And at least if you've got that little bit of knowledge, you can talk to them in a really sensitive, compassionate way, and just help and support them and signpost them. And it's just been incredible. It's been amazing, just some of the stuff that people do actually share with us. Equally, we do have people who are just, no, I'm not talking about it. And that's fine. We're not forcing people to talk, but we have worked really hard over the last 5 years to try and create that culture where it is okay to not be okay. And if you come forward to seek help, you will be treated sensitively, empathetically. We will do all we can to try and help and support you, whether it's you personally or it's a family issue that you're dealing with, because that's just as important.
Thank you, Ruth. I think what I'm hearing there is the importance of creating a safe space for people to discuss topics, even if you don't have the interventions on hand. Thank you. Olivia, on to you and booking.com. I mean, you talk about inclusion and not leaving people behind. So what are some of the examples?
Yeah, I think one of the initiatives that really stands out is our well-being philosophy is quite new. At Booking, we really only introduced it at the beginning of 2019. And for us, we have colleagues all around the world, and we wanted to think, how can we share what we mean by well-being? We're quite a HQ centric organization, right? So information really trickles down from us, to all our local offices, to offices around the world. And so what we actually did in that first year was we introduced an event called Global Wellbeing Week. And it was really a moment for all of us across the company, no matter what country you were in, to really start learning about what well-being means at Booking. What is our philosophy about it? What are we aiming to do? What are we doing well already? What are we not doing well? Where do we have aspirations about what we want to do? Also bringing some fun and engagement, right, to the well-being topic. That, there's obviously a very serious side about well-being and mental health and how do we address those people. But there's also a lot of people that are thriving, right, or looking to thrive. And so how do we also meet people where they are on their journey? It was actually really successful, Global Wellbeing Week, that in 2020 we moved it to Global Wellbeing Month. And this year we did it again. So May, I think hopefully in the future, will always be for us Global Wellbeing Month at Booking. But what really made the difference is that when we started in our planning for this event and every year subsequently, is we've worked really closely with local teams. So we've said, okay, what are the things we want generally everybody to know, but what are the things that are important to people if you're based in Singapore, or if you're based in Kenya, right? Or if you're based in Italy, or if you're based in, Mexico. So we really worked with teams that are locally based to say, okay, what's the important topics? Who are speakers in your area that would resonate with your audience? Because for us, we know, and I think a couple of people have already mentioned it, there are really differing attitudes and needs when it comes to well-being, and what people are willing to talk about and what people are willing to do, it really differs country to country. So we also wanted to meet people where they were, but also say, hey, it's okay. Look at us talking about it here. It's okay, but you can join us where you are. So that's been really successful. And, I think this will become a big moment for us in every calendar year. Of course, well-being is not restricted to 1 month, right? We use it really as like our flagship event. And then we tie that into our content and our programming for the whole year, so that there's a consistent story throughout the year when we talk about well-being. So something we've run this whole year is a campaign called Small Steps, where we brought external experts in and to talk about topics related to diversity, inclusion, and well-being. So from things such as meditation to mentorship to physical health to nutrition. So really bringing in people and looking at what are the small steps that people can take every day to be more inclusive, to be more well, and to look after themselves and others. And that's been really well received because it's a consistent message that people can dip in and out of. And that's what we see, right? People often look for information when they need it, not necessarily when they're not. And so we need to always be available and repeat the message throughout.
Perfect. Thank you, Olivia. Gemma, I'd love to hear from you about initiatives that have worked at UNICEF.
Well, it's very impressive to hear from our colleagues here about that stigma and how you guys have been able to bring people to talk about their mental health. For me personally, that's been a challenge. And what I have done is that to know what people really need is to do like anything anonymous, like to do a survey monkey or anything, any confidential form, anything that they are sure nobody's going to know, especially because I work with different offices and depending on the country, people, they won't share. And so I will, for instance, engage managers and say, look, if you guys are vulnerable and you tell them a bit about those moments when you have gone through challenges and what you have done about them and so on, and still there is a lot of reluctance here. So for me, once again, for me to know what really they need, how do I design those webinars on those topics is really to ask them anonymously. Other than that, during the pandemic, I did a weekly challenge so that, as one of our colleagues was saying here, to give them a few tips for that week and for them to try with me. For instance, let's try meditation this week, 5 minutes of headspace every day, and we do it together and stuff like that. But once again, everything was very like, people usually don't come forward.
Yes.
Well, I understand totally.
No,
you know?
I understand. And I think, so you were basically mentioning the data and the insights as to what the issues may be so that you can provide the relevant help. No, that makes sense. Okay,
We
so
value that confidentiality. Sorry. Yeah.
confidentiality is absolutely critical and super important. And it's a law here in Europe. So that's that's great. Okay, so we've got the last 5 minutes, but I'd like to open it up in case people have got questions. I see there's a question from Alan. I'm curious how you promoted the wellbeing rooms. What were your message to make people make the first step and decide to join the room and open up, Ruth?
When it was trialled, as I say, we had 300 people on this particular site. It was a motorway project. I think it was individuals just had confidence in the safety advisor. So an element of it was relationship. But I think the other key part was at that point in time, we were 3 years into our mental health journey. So it was an appreciation that we were taking it seriously. We weren't paying lip service to it. We genuinely want to help and support people. And confidentiality, absolutely critical. So, with the obvious exception of if unless you fear that somebody is at risk of significant harm to themselves or others, it is kept confidential. We do keep data on the number of people that we see and what the nature of the conversations that they have, and we keep that so we know if they're identifying themes. And also to support the wellbeing champions, because they can deal with some really, really tough things. But yeah, we just promote them. Some are available pretty much full time. Other smaller offices, we sort of, it's down to individual sites to manage. But typically they'll say, on a Tuesday and a Friday from 10 till 12, there'll be a wellbeing champion in there. So come and have a chat. And we do that in addition to our bigger sites having counsellors, so drop-in sessions with trained counsellors as well, which is really, really well received. So again, we just, as I think it was Olivia mentioned, it's repeating the message. It's always being in their face with it. So even if at this point in time you don't need it, but next month you might, and we'll still be there with the same message.
Perfect. Thank you, Ruth. It's interesting to see Shabs, also with the mental health experts, first aiders. It's a similar kind of approach, right? Is this the kind of thing that you'd like to set up?
I think so. Yeah, I was just writing that one down. And Bruce, were you saying that it's a mental health first aider that's in there?
It's mental health, so people manning the rooms. We've got 3,000 people in our business. 200 of them are now trained mental health first aiders. So it is only the first aiders and HR, but I think everybody in HR is a trained first aider now. So we're not putting people in there who haven't had the most basic training. And we're very clear, they're not counsellors, they're not therapists. They are there to support and to signpost. And sorry, just the other point was recommendation. That's been hugely valuable. Somebody's, will go in there and have a chat, and they will then go back to their colleagues and then chit chat, blokey talk, and they will then say, actually, I had a problem with such and such, and I went and had a chat with Rianne in the wellbeing room or whoever it might have been, and she was really good. She put me in touch with the EAP. She put me in touch with a specialist charity, for the gambling issue. She recommended that I went to my doctor. Or actually, it was just nice to offload and share it with somebody at work. Didn't do anything with it, but I felt so much better knowing that she knows and she regularly checks in with me. So again, it's just kind of building up that confidence and reputation. It does come down to relationship and trust a little bit. But we had a really good foundation there to start with, and it was supported massively by the project director on that site. He actually gave me £1,000 to go and spend in IKEA. And I think, just on the point of how do we promote the rooms look different. They look like a little sitting room in a flat. They do not look like an office. So they have a different feel to them, and they do look friendly, welcoming, informal, box tissues, packet of biscuits, that kind of thing. And as I say, to have the scatter cushions and all the fluffy stuff in inverted commas makes that difference. The fairy lights and pretty pictures on the wall makes a huge difference, and that makes it engaging and welcoming for people.
Well, thank you for your time. I think this has been super interesting. Also, just to see what organizations with people with thousands are starting to do. And indeed, it comes down to small steps. Also, enabling more of your people to have these conversations around mental health. Not everybody can be a trained counselor like Gemma, but using the data and the insights and then enabling others to go and provide support. I think this has been really, really valuable. I'd like to thank you for your time, and much success for the amazing work that you're doing.
Yeah, sorry, can I just add, if anybody sort of in the audience listening, we've got a little 3-page PDF on how to create a wellbeing room with some pictures so you can visualize it. If anybody would like to just contact me through LinkedIn, that would probably be the obvious place to do it. Or I'm happy to share it with you, Arusha, and you can share it. But, a picture tells 1,000 stories. It can be quite difficult trying to visualize what it looks like and how simple it is. But if anybody would like to do that, I'd be very happy to share it.
I see there's already a few. Look at that. Wonderful. Lots of excitement there. Really tangible. Thank you so much for your time, and Ruth, for your kindness to share a wonderful best practice.
Thank you so much. And same goes for me. I'd love to swap notes with anyone. A global role isn't easy. So
no, not at all.
Feel free to connect, and I'd be happy to share, and vice versa, please. Thanks, everyone.
For sure. All right then, guys. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll see you around.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.